Snow had a way of quieting even the loudest regrets. That morning, when Colton Hargrove rode the fence line on his bay gelding, the world seemed wrapped in cotton, every sound muffled, every horizon blurred into an endless sheet of white. His breath rose like smoke, his beard stiff with frost. For years the ranch had been his only companion, its cedar posts and weather-worn barns standing against storms the way he himself had stood against time, firm but lonely and not without cracks. He had thought that morning would be no different, another ride along frozen ridges, another day of silence stretching into night. But halfway down a hollow where the snow drifted deeper, he caught sight of color that had no place in winter. A smear of crimson on the snow. He reined the horse hard, his chest tightening. For a moment he thought it might be one of his cattle torn by wolves, but the shape was wrong, too human, too fragile. He dismounted, boots sinking to the knee, heart hammering against ribs grown accustomed to stillness. Two bodies lay crumpled at the base of a bare cottonwood, dark hair strewn across the snow like spilled ink. The first stirred faintly, a young woman with skin the color of copper warmed by firelight. Her lips parted, breath shallow, eyes glazed with both fear and something like defiance. Beside her, another woman, older by some years, leaned protectively over her, blood seeping through a tear in her shoulder. They were Apache. He had no doubt. Colton stood frozen, torn between mercy and caution. To bring them back risked trouble. Neighbors would not forgive harboring those they called enemies. But to leave them here was to let them die in the snow, and his conscience gnawed at the thought. The younger one's eyes found his, holding him as if pinning down his very soul. A flicker of something unspoken passed between them, plea, challenge, or condemnation he could not name. His hands trembled as he bent, sliding arms beneath their chilled bodies, heaving them onto the saddle. He knew each step toward his ranch was a step away from the quiet life he had carved, yet he took it anyway. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled unevenly as he set them near the hearth. Shadows leapt across their faces, softening bruises but not erasing the truth of their wounds. He poured whiskey into a rag and pressed it to the elder sister's shoulder, ignoring her hiss of pain. She did not flinch from his gaze, though, her dark eyes steady, weighing him as though he were the one under judgment. The younger, fevered and fragile, whimpered once before curling against the blanket he wrapped around her. Colton worked in silence, melting snow in a tin cup, tearing strips from an old shirt to bind wounds. When he finally sat back, chest heaving, he realized he had not heard another human voice in weeks. Now the cabin pulsed with quiet breaths and the soft rustle of fabric. His loneliness pressed sharper in the presence of these strangers, as though absence had suddenly become unbearable when faced with their presence. He wondered what men had done this to them and whether those men would come looking. The storm raged through the night, rattling shutters, howling down the chimney like a beast hunting at the door. Sleep would not come to him. Each time he closed his eyes, he saw their faces, stern, frightened, unyielding. He imagined the judgment of the town, the whispering mouths that already called him a failure, a man too odd, too barren to build a family. Now, should word spread of Apache women beneath his roof, their scorn would double, their eyes sharpen into knives. Still, he could not bring himself to push them back into the snow. Morning broke with brittle light, the storm slackening, though drifts piled high around the ranch. Colton stepped onto the porch to breathe, but froze when he saw movement beyond the fence line. A figure approached on horseback, cloaked in wolfskin, head bowed. Instinct sent his hand to the rifle by the door. As the rider drew nearer, Colton saw he was no enemy raider, but an older man, face lined like cracked leather, eyes burning despite the cough that shook his frame. The horse stumbled from exhaustion, and Colton hurried forward against his own better judgment. The old man slid from the saddle with dignity, despite his obvious weakness. His gaze went past Colton and through the cabin door where the sisters lay. Something in his bearing, in the deliberate way he straightened his spine though his body trembled, demanded respect. Colton lowered the rifle. By the firelight once more, words came haltingly, broken between English and gestures, yet enough to paint the story. His name was Taza. He was father to the women, Nayeli the younger and Yaji the elder. He spoke of sickness hollowing his chest, of enemies who hunted him for reasons Colton could not fully grasp. He feared death was near and with it, the vulnerability of his daughters. Then he said something that stilled the very air of the room. He wished Colton to take them as wives. The word struck like a hammer. Colton felt the blood rush to his ears, shame and disbelief mixing in equal measure. He stammered, unable to reply, but Taza's eyes held him firm. There was no jest, no malice, only urgency, a father's final gamble. Nayeli lowered her gaze, hands twisting the blanket nervously. Yaji's eyes, sharp and unsparing, flicked between them, measuring the weight of this moment. Colton wanted to refuse. The scandal alone would ruin him in town. He imagined whispers, children pointing, men refusing his hand at the saloon. He was already judged strange, solitary. This would confirm their stories. Yet the memory of lifting their bodies from the snow, of seeing life flicker fragile in their eyes, made his refusal falter. He thought of his own nights staring at the ceiling, the hollowness of winters without laughter, the emptiness he never admitted aloud. Taza coughed hard, leaning forward, and gripped Colton's hand with surprising strength. "Decide soon," he rasped. "Winter devours what is unguarded." The fire popped sharply and Colton felt heat flush his face. He looked at Yaji's steady gaze, at Nayeli's fragile form curled against the hearth, and then at the dying man whose eyes burned with both fear and hope. The snow beat against the cabin walls as though urging him, demanding his choice. And for the first time in years, Colton felt the silence of his ranch break, not with words, but with a presence that refused to let him remain alone.